Hey guys, tonight we embark on a journey through chambers where dust motes dance in forgotten light, where parchment crackles like autumn leaves, and where the impossible stares back at us from faded ink. You're about to step into the world of cartographers who knew too much, explorers who mapped lands they never visited, and civilizations that left us riddles drawn in coastlines and mountain ranges. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture yourself standing in a library vault, the air thick with the scent of aged leather and yellowed paper. Your fingers trace the edges of maps so old they seem to whisper secrets from centuries past. These aren't just any maps. These are the impossible ones, the charts that shouldn't exist, the documents that make historians pause and archaeologists question everything they thought they knew. Tonight, we're diving into the most mysterious cartographic puzzles our ancestors left behind, maps that continue to baffle experts and challenge our understanding of ancient knowledge. The first time you encounter one of these enigmatic charts, your mind rebels against what you're seeing. How could medieval monks draw accurate coastlines of continents they supposedly never knew existed? Why do ancient Turkish admirals possess maps showing Antarctica without its ice sheet? How did Chinese cartographers from the 15th century create world maps more accurate than European charts made centuries later? These questions don't have comfortable answers, and that's precisely what makes them so compelling. You lean closer to examine the faded ink, and something unsettling becomes clear. These maps weren't created by accident or guesswork. The precision is too exact, the details too specific, the knowledge too profound. Someone, somewhere, somehow possessed information that our history books insist was impossible to obtain. The implications stretch far beyond simple geography, reaching into the very foundations of how we understand human civilization and the flow of knowledge across time. Consider for a moment what it means to create an accurate map. You need explorers brave enough to venture into unknown waters, navigators skilled enough to chart their course, and cartographers precise enough to translate three-dimensional reality onto flat surfaces. You need instruments to measure distance and direction, mathematical knowledge to calculate coordinates, and enough time to survey vast territories. Most importantly, you need to survive the journey and return home to share your discoveries. Yet, these mysterious maps seem to bypass all these requirements, displaying knowledge that appears to have materialized from thin air. The scholars who study these documents often speak in hushed tones, their voices carrying a mixture of fascination and frustration. They've spent decades analyzing ink composition, studying paper fibers, and cross-referencing historical records. They've applied carbon dating, spectral analysis, and every tool modern science can offer, yet the maps remain stubbornly authentic, Their age verified, their accuracy undeniable, their origins inexplicable. It's as though history itself is playing tricks on us, leaving breadcrumbs that lead not to answers, but to deeper mysteries. What makes these cartographic anomalies even more intriguing is their consistency. They don't appear as isolated oddities scattered randomly through time. Instead, they form patterns, connections that span continents and centuries. A map created in Constantinople mirrors details found in Chinese charts. Portuguese navigational aids echo knowledge preserved in ancient Islamic texts. It's as if a hidden network of information existed long before our conventional understanding of global exploration, a web of knowledge that connected civilizations we thought lived in isolation. You might wonder why these maps matter beyond academic curiosity. The answer lies in what they reveal about human capability and knowledge preservation. If ancient cartographers could accurately depict lands supposedly unknown to them, what other assumptions about the past might be wrong? How much knowledge has been lost, forgotten, or deliberately hidden? These maps suggest that our ancestors possessed far more sophisticated understanding of the world than we've given them credit for, and that realization forces us to reconsider everything we think we know about historical timelines and technological development. The preservation of these documents adds another layer to the mystery. Many survived in places where they shouldn't have, protected by circumstances that seem almost miraculous. Library fires that destroyed everything except the most enigmatic maps. Floods that spared only the most controversial documents. Wars that claimed countless artifacts while leaving behind the very items that challenge our understanding of history. It's as though fate itself conspired to ensure these puzzles would survive long enough to confound future generations. Some researchers have proposed conventional explanations, theories that attempt to rationalize the impossible within acceptable historical frameworks. They suggest that ancient trade networks were more extensive than previously believed, that oral traditions preserved geographical knowledge across generations, or that educated guesses by skilled cartographers happened to prove remarkably accurate. Yet these explanations often require stretching credibility beyond comfortable limits, demanding that we accept coincidences so extraordinary they border on the supernatural. The emotional impact of encountering these maps shouldn't be underestimated. Historians who've dedicated their careers to understanding the past find themselves confronting evidence that their life's work might be built on incomplete foundations. Archaeologists who've carefully constructed timelines of human development face artifacts that don't fit their carefully ordered sequences. The cognitive dissonance is profound, creating a tension between scientific methodology and undeniable evidence that refuses to conform to established patterns. Perhaps most unsettling is what these maps reveal about the fragility of knowledge itself. If advanced geographical understanding existed in ancient times only to be lost, forgotten, or suppressed, what other discoveries might have vanished from human memory? How many times has our species climbed toward enlightenment only to tumble back into darkness? These cartographic mysteries remind us that progress isn't always linear, that knowledge can disappear as easily as it emerges, and that our current understanding of the world might be just one chapter in a much longer and more complex story. The technical sophistication displayed in these ancient maps often surpasses contemporary efforts by centuries. Projection methods that weren't supposedly invented until the Renaissance appear in medieval charts. Longitude calculations that Europeans struggled with for centuries show up in documents predating Columbus. Topographical details that required aerial survey techniques appear on maps created long before flight was possible. Each technical impossibility adds weight to the growing realization that someone, somewhere, knew far more than they should have. As you study these enigmatic documents, patterns begin to emerge that suggest systematic knowledge rather than random luck. Coastlines match with mathematical precision. Island positions align with modern satellite imagery. Mountain ranges appear where geological surveys later confirmed their existence. The accuracy isn't selective or approximate. It's comprehensive and exact, displaying a level of geographical knowledge that conventional history insists was impossible to achieve. The psychological effect of contemplating these mysteries extends beyond academic circles. They tap into something fundamental about human nature, our desire to understand our place in the grand sweep of history. When confronted with evidence that our ancestors might have known more than we realized, we're forced to reconsider not just the past, but our own assumptions about knowledge, discovery, and human potential. These maps become mirrors, reflecting our own limitations and biases, challenging us to approach history with greater humility and openness. Tonight, we'll explore the most compelling examples of these cartographic impossibilities, examining the evidence with the careful attention they deserve. We'll walk through dusty archives and forgotten collections, studying documents that have puzzled experts for generations. We'll consider the various theories proposed to explain their existence, weighing evidence, and examining the implications of each possibility. Most importantly, we'll confront the uncomfortable questions these maps raise about the nature of knowledge itself and the gaps in our understanding of human history. The journey ahead will challenge comfortable assumptions and force us to consider possibilities that stretch the boundaries of conventional thinking. We'll encounter maps that shouldn't exist, knowledge that couldn't have been obtained, and mysteries that refuse to yield their secrets despite centuries of investigation. Along the way, we'll discover that the most profound questions often don't have simple answers, and that sometimes the greatest discoveries lie not in finding solutions, but in learning to ask better questions. Deep in the archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, a document rests that has tormented scholars for over 5 centuries. The Piri Reis map of 1513 displays the Atlantic Ocean with startling accuracy, but it's what lies at the bottom edge that stops experts cold. There, rendered in meticulous detail, appears the northern coastline of Antarctica. Not the ice-covered wasteland we know today, but the actual rocky shoreline that lies buried beneath miles of glacial ice. The implications slither through your mind like cold water. This map was created nearly 3 centuries before Antarctica was officially discovered, and it shows geographical features that weren't confirmed until the 1950s when seismic surveys finally penetrated the ice sheet. Admiral Piri Reis, the Ottoman cartographer who created this masterpiece, claimed he compiled it from over 20 source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. He mentions charts captured from Spanish sailors, Portuguese navigational aids, and most intriguingly, a map that supposedly belonged to Christopher Columbus himself. Yet, even accounting for these sources, the Antarctic coastline remains unexplained. Columbus never sailed south of the Caribbean, and no European expedition would reach Antarctic waters for another 300 years. You examine the map's annotations, written in elegant Ottoman Turkish script, and discover that Piri Reis describes lands where gold is so abundant that inhabitants use it for common tools. He writes of regions where the sun shines differently, where the very air feels strange to breathe. These aren't the fantasies of a medieval imagination running wild. They read like the careful observations of someone who either visited these places or spoke extensively with those who had. The technical precision of the map's construction reveals another layer of mystery. The projection used to flatten the curved earth onto parchment employs mathematical techniques that European cartographers wouldn't master for decades. The longitude lines, those invisible markers that bedeviled navigators until the invention of precise chronometers, appear calculated with remarkable accuracy. Someone possessed not just geographical knowledge, but sophisticated mathematical understanding that shouldn't have existed in the early 16th century. Modern analysts have subjected the Piri Reis map to every form of scientific scrutiny imaginable. Computer modeling confirms that the coastlines match satellite imagery with uncanny precision. The positioning of islands corresponds to their actual locations within margins of error that would be impressive even by today's standards. Carbon dating verifies the age of both the parchment and the inks used, eliminating the possibility of modern forgery. Yet the knowledge displayed remains impossible to explain through conventional historical channels. Perhaps even more unsettling is what the map doesn't show. While the Antarctic coastline appears in accurate detail, other regions that were well known in 1513 contain glaring errors. European coastlines, which should have been precisely mapped by Ottoman navigators, display inconsistencies and mistakes that seem almost deliberate. It's as though the cartographer had access to incredibly accurate information about distant, unknown lands, while possessing flawed knowledge about familiar territories. The Ottoman Empire's vast trade networks stretched from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, connecting civilizations across 3 continents. Merchants, diplomats, and scholars flowed through Constantinople carrying information from the far corners of the known world. Yet, even accounting for this extensive intelligence network, the Antarctic coastline remains problematic. No trade routes extended to the southern polar regions. No merchant vessels plied those icy waters. No diplomatic missions ventured into the frozen wasteland at the bottom of the world. You trace the delicate lines of the map with your finger, feeling the texture of parchment that has survived wars, fires, and 5 centuries of human curiosity. The ink has faded to a warm brown, but the precision of each coastline remains sharp and clear. Islands appear exactly where modern navigation places them. Bays and inlets match contemporary surveys with mathematical exactness. River mouths open onto the Atlantic precisely where geological evidence confirms ancient waterways once flowed. The mystery deepens when you consider other maps from the same period that display similar impossibilities. The Oronteus Phineas map of 1531 shows Antarctica as a continent with clearly defined borders, mountain ranges, and river systems. The Mercator map of 1569 depicts the southern landmass with topographical details that wouldn't be confirmed until polar expeditions of the 20th century. These weren't isolated anomalies or lucky guesses. They represent a consistent pattern of impossible knowledge appearing across different cultures and time periods. Historical records from the Ottoman court mention that Piri Reis presented his map to Sultan Selim I as evidence of his geographical expertise. The admiral claimed his work would aid Ottoman naval expansion and demonstrate the empire's sophisticated understanding of global geography. Yet, if the map contained impossible information, why would a practical military leader like Selim I value it? The answer might lie in the possibility that Ottoman navigators possessed knowledge channels we've never discovered, information networks that extended far beyond the limits of recorded history. The survival of the Piri Reis map itself borders on miraculous. The Topkapi Palace Library contained thousands of documents, most of which were lost to fires, floods, and the general entropy that claims historical artifacts over time. Yet this particular map, with its impossible Antarctic coastline, somehow avoided destruction. It was rediscovered in 1929 during a renovation project, found carefully preserved in a collection of documents that had been forgotten for centuries. The circumstances of its preservation seem almost too convenient, as though fate itself conspired to ensure this puzzle would survive to confound future generations. Contemporary scholars have proposed various theories to explain the map's impossible accuracy. Some suggest that ancient civilizations possessed advanced navigational techniques that were subsequently lost. Others propose that climate change revealed Antarctic coastlines during medieval warm periods, allowing unknown explorers to map the continent before ice sheets expanded. A few researchers have even speculated about inherited knowledge from pre-Columbian civilizations that somehow reached Ottoman cartographers through channels we can't trace. Each theory carries its own problems and contradictions. The climate explanation requires temperature changes far more dramatic than geological evidence supports. The lost civilization hypothesis demands the existence of advanced maritime cultures for which we have no archaeological proof. The inherited knowledge theory assumes information preservation across centuries without leaving any trace in historical records. Yet the map itself remains authentic, its impossible knowledge verified by modern science, its mysteries unresolved despite decades of investigation. The emotional weight of contemplating these possibilities settles over you like dust in an ancient library. If the Piri Reis map represents genuine knowledge rather than extraordinary coincidence, then our understanding of human history requires fundamental revision. The implications ripple outward touching everything from the timeline of exploration to the sophistication of ancient cultures. These aren't merely academic questions. They strike at the heart of how we understand ourselves and our place in the long story of human development. We understand ourselves and our place in the long story of human development. You pull away from the Piri Reis map, your mind still reeling from its impossibilities, and turn toward another collection that has haunted researchers for decades. The Vinland map, housed in Yale University's Beinecke Library, presents a different kind of cartographic mystery, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about medieval knowledge of the New World. Created sometime in the 15th century, this map clearly depicts portions of North America, including what appears to be Newfoundland and the eastern Canadian coastline, complete with Norse inscriptions describing Vinland as discovered by Bjarni and Leif in company. The implications hit you like a physical blow. If authentic, this map predates Columbus by half a century, suggesting that knowledge of American land circulated in European scholarly circles long before the official age of discovery. The coastlines match remarkably well with actual geography, showing bays, peninsulas, and island formations that wouldn't be accurately mapped by European explorers until the 16th and 17th centuries. Yet, here they appear, drawn with confident strokes by a medieval cartographer who supposedly had no access to such information. The controversy surrounding the Vinland map has raged for decades, with experts divided into passionate camps. Chemical analysis of the ink revealed traces of anatase, a form of titanium dioxide that wasn't commercially available till the 20th century, leading some scholars to dismiss the entire document as an elaborate modern forgery. Yet other tests, including radiocarbon dating of the parchment and analysis of the manuscript's binding, consistently point to medieval origins. The contradiction defies easy resolution, creating a puzzle within a puzzle that grows more complex with each investigation. You examine the map's artistic style, noting the confident manner in which the unknown cartographer rendered the Atlantic Ocean. Unlike many medieval maps that depicted the ocean as a barrier filled with monsters and impossibilities, this chart treats the Atlantic as a navigable waterway connecting known lands. The Norse settlements in Greenland appear in their proper positions relative to Iceland and Scandinavia. The mysterious western lands show topographical details that suggest first-hand knowledge rather than speculative geography based on legend and hearsay. The historical context makes the map even more intriguing. By the 15th century, memories of Viking expeditions to Vinland had largely faded from European consciousness. The sagas that preserved these stories remained locked in Old Norse manuscripts, accessible only to scholars who could read the ancient language. Yet someone possessed enough detailed knowledge to create a geographically accurate map of lands the Vikings had visited centuries earlier. The transmission of such precise information across generations raises uncomfortable questions about what other knowledge might have survived in hidden channels. Moving deeper into the archives, you encounter the Continoplanisphere, a Portuguese map from 1502 that displays the Brazilian coastline with remarkable accuracy, despite being created only 2 years after Pedro Alvarez Cabral's first recorded landing there. The speed with which Portuguese cartographers acquired detailed geographical knowledge of the South American coast suggests either extraordinarily efficient surveying expeditions or access to pre-existing information about these supposedly unknown lands. The map shows river mouths, coastal formations, and inland features that would have required extensive exploration to document accurately. The technical sophistication of early 16th century Portuguese maps often exceeds what conventional history suggests was possible. The Miller Atlas of 1519 depicts the Indian Ocean with precision that rivals modern satellite imagery, showing islands, atolls, and reef systems that Portuguese navigators supposedly discovered through trial and error exploration. Yet, the mathematical accuracy of these charts implies systematic surveying techniques that wouldn't be formally developed for decades. Someone was applying scientific methodology to cartography long before the scientific revolution supposedly introduced such approaches to geographical studies. You pause before a collection of Chinese maps that present their own set of impossibilities. The Gyeongnido map, created in Korea in 1402 but based on Chinese sources, shows a remarkably accurate representation of Africa nearly a century before Portuguese explorers rounded the Cape of Good Hope. The continent's distinctive shape appears clearly recognizable, complete with the correct proportional relationships between its various regions. Chinese cartographers somehow possessed detailed knowledge of African geography at a time when European maps still depicted the continent as a vague landmass connected to unknown southern territories. The psychological impact of studying these documents begins to accumulate like sediment in still water. Each map presents its own impossibility, its own challenge to accepted historical narratives. Taken individually, they might be dismissed as anomalies, lucky guesses, or misinterpretations of fragmentary evidence. Viewed collectively, they form a pattern that demands explanation, a consistent thread of impossible knowledge woven through centuries of human cartographic endeavor. The preservation patterns of these controversial maps add another layer of mystery to their existence. Many survived in locations where they shouldn't have, protected by circumstances that seem almost providential. The Piri-Reis map lay forgotten in Ottoman archives for centuries before its rediscovery. The Vinland map appeared in a European collection with murky provenance, its origins traced through a chain of ownership that becomes increasingly vague as investigators probe deeper. These documents seem to emerge from shadows when the time is right for their secrets to be questioned. Modern technology has provided new tools for analyzing these cartographic mysteries, but the results often raise more questions than they answer. Satellite imagery confirms the accuracy of coastlines drawn centuries before such precision should have been possible. Computer modeling reveals mathematical relationships and ancient projections that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of spherical geometry. Spectral analysis uncovers details in faded inks that suggest knowledge of chemical processes supposedly unknown to medieval scholars. The academic response to these impossibilities reveals the tension between scientific methodology and inconvenient evidence. Researchers who've built careers on established historical timelines find themselves confronting artifacts that don't fit their carefully constructed frameworks. The cognitive dissonance creates defensive reactions, attempts to explain away anomalies rather than acknowledge their implications. Yet the maps persist, their mysteries intact despite decades of investigation and attempted debunking. You lean back in your chair, surrounded by reproductions of impossible documents, and feel the weight of accumulated mystery pressing down like the atmosphere of a deep cave. These maps aren't just historical curiosities or academic puzzles. They're windows into aspects of human knowledge and capability that conventional history has forgotten or never acknowledged. They suggest that our ancestors possessed understanding and abilities that we've systematically underestimated, creating blind spots in our perception of the past that may be hiding profound truths about human potential and achievement. The emotional resonance of these discoveries extends beyond scholarly circles, touching something fundamental about how we understand ourselves and our place in history. When confronted with evidence that challenges basic assumptions about technological development and knowledge transmission, we're forced to reconsider not just specific historical events, but the entire framework through which we interpret the human past. These maps become catalysts for deeper questioning about the nature of progress, the fragility of knowledge, and the possibility that our current understanding represents just one perspective on a far more complex and mysterious story. The journey through these cartographic impossibilities reveals patterns that seem to transcend individual mysteries, suggesting connections and relationships that span continents and centuries. Knowledge appears where it shouldn't, survives when it should have been lost, and demonstrates accuracy that defies conventional explanations. Each map adds another piece to a puzzle whose full picture remains frustratingly out of reach, tantalizingly close, yet persistently elusive. As you sit in the quiet of the archive, surrounded by the whispers of ancient parchment and the weight of impossible knowledge, you begin to understand that these maps are more than historical artifacts. They're invitations to expand our thinking, challenges to our assumptions, and reminders that the past may hold secrets far more profound than we've dared to imagine. The mystery deepens with each document examined, each coastline traced, each impossible detail confirmed by modern science. The silence of the archive wraps around you like velvet as you turn to examine another collection that has mystified researchers for generations. The Fra Mauro map, created in Venice around 1450, spreads before you like a window into impossible knowledge. This massive circular chart, nearly 2 meters in diameter, depicts the world with a precision that shouldn't have existed decades before the great voyages of discovery. Yet there it is, showing African coastlines with accuracy that Portuguese explorers wouldn't achieve for another 50 years. Asian territories mapped with detail that Marco Polo's accounts could never have provided, and ocean currents marked with the confidence of someone who had sailed them personally. Your fingers hover over the map's intricate details, noting how Fra Mauro described his sources with tantalizing vagueness. He mentions travelers who brought him information from distant lands, merchants who carried more than silk and spices in their caravans, and ancient texts that contained geographical secrets lost to most of the world. The monk's own annotations speak of lands where the sun behaves strangely, where magnetic compasses point in unexpected directions, where the very stars seem arranged differently in unfamiliar patterns. These aren't the musings of medieval fantasy, but the careful observations of someone documenting genuine geographical phenomena. The mathematical sophistication embedded in the Fra Mauro map reveals layers of knowledge that conventional history struggles to explain. The projection techniques used to represent the spherical Earth on a flat surface employ calculations that European mathematicians supposedly wouldn't master for another century. Distance relationships between far-flung locations demonstrate understanding of the Earth's true size at a time when most scholars still debated whether the planet was significantly smaller than ancient Greek calculations had suggested. Longitude estimations, those notoriously difficult measurements that would plague navigators until the invention of marine chronometers, appear calculated with remarkable precision. Moving deeper into the collection, you encounter the Dulcer chart of 1339, a Catalan map that displays the Mediterranean and Black Sea with accuracy that rivals modern navigational charts. But it's the document's treatment of the African coast that stops you cold. The map shows the continent extending far to the south, contradicting the prevailing medieval belief that Africa was a relatively small landmass. Rivers appear in their correct positions, mountain ranges follow accurate alignments, and coastal features match geographical reality with uncanny precision. Someone in 14th century Catalonia possessed detailed knowledge of African geography that European explorers wouldn't officially acquire for another century. The preservation circumstances surrounding these maps continue to follow patterns that seem almost orchestrated by fate itself. The Fra Mauro map survived the fall of Venice, Napoleon's conquests, 2 world wars, and countless floods that claimed other precious documents. The Dulcer chart emerged from a private collection whose ownership could be traced back through generations of families who apparently never realized the significance of what they possessed. It's as though these controversial documents were protected by invisible guardians, ensuring their survival until humanity was ready to confront their implications. You discover that similar patterns of impossible knowledge appear in maps from cultures that had no known contact with each other. Chinese charts from the Ming Dynasty show American coastlines decades before Columbus. Islamic maps from Baghdad display European rivers with precision that suggests first-hand surveying. Norse sagas describe lands far to the west with geographical details that match the North American coast with startling accuracy. The consistency of impossible knowledge across isolated cultures points toward either remarkable coincidence or the existence of information networks that our historical understanding has completely missed. The technical analysis of these documents reveals another troubling pattern. Many employ ink formulations that shouldn't have been possible with medieval chemistry. Pigments appear that require mineral compounds from regions supposedly unknown to the map makers. Paper compositions include fibers from plants that grew only in distant continents. Carbon dating consistently confirms the age of materials, while raising questions about how such diverse components could have been assembled in single documents created centuries ago. The emotional weight of contemplating these impossibilities grows heavier with each revelation. Academic careers have been built on assumptions about the linear progression of human knowledge, the gradual expansion of geographical understanding through systematic exploration. Yet, these maps suggest that such neat timelines might be convenient fictions, that knowledge flowed through channels we've never recognized, following patterns that conventional history has never acknowledged. The implications stretch beyond cartography into fundamental questions about how information moves through human societies and what kinds of understanding our ancestors actually possessed. You pause before a reproduction of the Xeno map, supposedly created in the 14th century, but not published until 1558. This controversial chart depicts islands in the North Atlantic that may correspond to parts of North America, showing geographical features with detail that suggests direct observation rather than speculative drawing. The map's complex provenance, involving claims of inherited family documents and lost expeditions, has made it a lightning rod for scholarly debate. Yet, computer analysis of its geographical relationships reveals mathematical precision that would be difficult to achieve through pure guesswork or deliberate fabrication. The psychological impact of studying these documents extends beyond intellectual curiosity into something approaching existential questioning. If ancient cartographers possessed knowledge that modern science has only recently confirmed, what other assumptions about human capability might be wrong? How much understanding has been lost, forgotten, or deliberately suppressed over the centuries? These maps become mirrors reflecting our own limitations, challenging comfortable beliefs about progress and the steady accumulation of human knowledge. The patterns emerging from this collection of impossible documents suggest systematic rather than random phenomena. Knowledge appears where it shouldn't, survives when it should have perished, and demonstrates accuracy that defies explanation through conventional channels. The consistency of impossibility across different cultures, time periods, and geographical regions points toward underlying realities that our historical framework has failed to accommodate. Each map adds weight to the growing realization that human understanding of the world may have followed far more complex pathways than we've imagined. As you sit surrounded by these cartographic mysteries, the archive's silence seems to pulse with unspoken questions. The dust motes dancing in filtered light become metaphors for knowledge floating just beyond reach, tantalizingly close yet persistently elusive. These maps aren't merely historical artifacts or academic puzzles. They're invitations to reconsider everything we think we know about human capability, knowledge preservation, and the true timeline of discovery and understanding. The journey through these impossible documents reveals that mystery itself might be the most important discovery. In a world where we assume that most geographical secrets have been solved, where satellite imagery has mapped every coastline and digital technology has measured every mountain. These ancient charts remind us that profound questions remain unanswered. They suggest that the past holds secrets far deeper than we've acknowledged, knowledge far more sophisticated than we've given our ancestors credit for, and possibilities far more extraordinary than our current frameworks allow us to imagine. The investigation continues, each document examined adding another layer to an increasingly complex puzzle. The maps wait patiently, their secrets locked in faded ink and yellowed parchment, challenging anyone brave enough to confront their implications. They speak of civilizations that knew more than they should have, explorers who traveled farther than recorded history acknowledges, and knowledge networks that operated beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding. In their impossible accuracy lies an invitation to expand our thinking, to question our assumptions, and to prepare ourselves for discoveries that may reshape everything we believe about the human story. The silence deepens as you move toward a glass case containing what may be the most disturbing cartographic mystery of all. The Orontius Phineas map of 1531 spreads beneath protective lighting, its elegant Renaissance script labeling a continent that shouldn't have existed in human consciousness for 1531 another 3 centuries. Antarctica appears here not as the ice-locked wasteland we know, but as a temperate landmass complete with rivers, mountain ranges, and coastal plains. The detail is breathtaking and impossible in equal measure. Your breath fogs the glass slightly as you lean closer, studying the careful pen strokes that define coastlines matching the rocky shore hidden beneath miles of ice. Modern seismic surveys have confirmed the accuracy of these underwater features, revealing mountain peaks and valley systems that correspond exactly to what the 16th century cartographer somehow knew. The mathematical precision required to project such geographical information onto parchment speaks to knowledge that conventional history insists could not have existed. The emotional impact strikes you like cold water. Here is evidence that someone, somewhere, possessed intimate knowledge of Antarctic geography during a period when the continent lay hidden beneath ice sheets that had been stable for millennia. The implications spiral outward, touching every assumption about climate history, exploration timelines, and the preservation of ancient knowledge. Either our understanding of Ice Age chronology is fundamentally flawed, or information about Antarctica survived from a time when the continent was accessible to human observation. You discover that Orontius Phineas claimed to base his work on ancient sources, mentioning Greek texts and Roman geographical treatises that have since vanished from historical records. His annotations describe a southern land where the seasons reverse, where snow falls during summer months in the north, where certain stars become visible that cannot be seen from Mediterranean latitudes. These observations read like the careful notes of someone who had either visited Antarctica or spoken extensively with those who had. The technical sophistication of the map's construction reveals another layer of impossibility. The projection mathematics required to accurately represent polar regions challenged cartographers well into the modern era. Yet here, such techniques appear fully formed in a Renaissance document. Longitude calculations for the southern polar region demonstrate understanding of spherical geometry and astronomical relationships that European scholars were supposedly still developing. Someone possessed not just geographical knowledge, but advanced mathematical skills that our historical timeline cannot accommodate. Moving to another section of the archive, you encounter a collection that makes your skin crawl with unease. Medieval Islamic maps from the House of Wisdom in Baghdad display geographical knowledge that spans continents with accuracy that seems to mock the limitations of 8th and 9th century exploration. These charts show river systems in Africa with precision that suggests aerial surveying, mountain ranges in Asia positioned with mathematical exactness, and ocean currents mapped with detail that implies systematic scientific observation over generations. The preservation of these Islamic maps presents its own mystery within the larger enigma. The Mongol destruction of Baghdad in 1258 claimed countless manuscripts, yet somehow the most geographically impossible documents survived. Library fires that consumed entire collections left behind precisely the charts that challenge our understanding of medieval knowledge. Wars that scattered Islamic scholarship across the known world somehow preserved the very documents that suggest Islamic cartographers possessed information networks extending far beyond what conventional history acknowledges. You trace the delicate Arabic script that labels distant lands with names that wouldn't appear in European sources for centuries. Chinese territories appear with topographical detail that suggests direct observation rather than second-hand reports from travelers. American coastlines emerge from the parchment with accuracy that predates official Islamic contact with the New World by hundreds of years. Each impossible detail adds weight to the growing realization that medieval Islamic civilization possessed geographical understanding that our historical frameworks cannot explain. The mathematical precision embedded in these Islamic charts reveals knowledge of astronomical navigation that supposedly wasn't developed until the Age of Discovery. Star charts integrated into geographical maps show constellations visible only from specific latitudes, suggesting that Islamic navigators had sailed to regions where such observations were possible. Compass variations are noted with accuracy. That implies understanding of magnetic declination decades before European navigators began systematically recording such phenomena. The psychological weight of these discoveries accumulates like pressure in a diving chamber. Each document examined pushes against the comfortable boundaries of accepted historical knowledge, creating cognitive dissonance that grows more intense with every impossible detail confirmed. Academic frameworks built on assumptions about the linear progression of human understanding begin to crack under the weight of evidence that suggests far more complex patterns of knowledge development and preservation. You pause before a collection of Polynesian stick charts, their delicate construction from palm fronds and shells creating navigation aids that guided Pacific voyagers across thousands of miles of open ocean. These charts encode understanding of wave patterns, current flows, and stellar navigation that rivals modern scientific knowledge of Pacific oceanography. The precision required to create such aids speaks to generations of careful observation and systematic knowledge accumulation. Yet conventional history has largely overlooked the sophistication of Polynesian navigation science. As you close the archive doors behind you, the weight of impossible knowledge settles in your chest like lead. These maps whisper of civilizations that charted unknown seas, scholars who preserved secrets across dark centuries, and navigators who sailed beyond the edges of recorded history. They remind us that human understanding has never followed the neat timelines we've constructed, that knowledge flows through channels we've forgotten, and that mystery itself might be the most profound discovery of all. The dust motes still dance in the fading light, carrying secrets we may never fully comprehend, but perhaps that's exactly as it should be.